like to call this meeting to order. This is Wednesday, July 31st. This is a regular meeting of the Pear Beach Building Committee. I guess this is saying special meeting. This is a regular meeting, right?
Yeah, that was the first one that went out.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
it's a
it
regular.
had to be, no,
It's
it's special.
no,
because
it's
it's
on
on
the
the
I think
calendar.
it's a regular meeting.
It's a
Right,
regular meeting.
but it wasn't handed into the tax. There was a miscommunication between Jeannie and
Oh, I
myself.
see.
We were waiting, I was waiting to get these approved, and Jeannie was waiting for it, so it never went to the dump truck.
I see.
So it just had to be a special meeting.
Got it.
The next
So
one
this
is,
is a special meeting,
next
so
one
we
is
can't
regular.
add to the agenda.
But, you know, let me ask you, you did send out an agenda for the rest of the year, and if our next one is August 28th, you now have September 4th listed, and
Mhm.
is
no,
that gonna
but there's enough
change?
time, there's enough time between now and the August 28th that it's a regular.
No, I'm just trying to
Yes.
plan my
Yeah,
calendar
I
so I can
understand.
have both.
Yeah, I mean,
As best I can. I mean,
I would
realize
anticipate
there
we
might be
we
some
probably are not gonna meet
changes,
them
but-
a week apart, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so, with that, we've got some housekeeping that needs to be done. We've got minutes from the prior 3 meetings that need to be approved. So if we can start with the minutes of the June 19th meeting, and there were some amendments. We had discussed this at a prior meeting, and then there were some amendments that needed to be made. So if you guys can take a look at the minutes from the June 19th meeting. Let us know if you're satisfied.
I'm
with
just
the
gonna let
cap.
you know that I gave those two today was, I think in the last meeting it was missed that it said minutes of June 3rd, so it's actually supposed to say the 5th, and I had gone and
I
changed
see.
that already on the website,
Got it,
so it's already been changed, but just in case you had told it or.
yeah. And, Martha, I know this.
Yeah, I move
You're
to
okay with-
approve.
Okay, wonderful. Can we have a second on that?
Second.
All those in favor? Thank you for that. Okay, so moving on to the minutes of July 10th. Everybody's had a chance to take a look at those. Any questions on those, or may I invite a motion to approve those? Anyone?
So moved.
Okay, second. Great, Diana, so Cheryl, Diana, all those in favor? Thank you for that. Okay, so then on to the minutes of July 17th. So our lengthy meeting, our lengthy joint meeting with the commission. These were initially done by Jamie Gore, and then I took a crack at also just, because Tom was not with us at that meeting, so I took a crack at that. Has everyone had a chance to take a look at those? May I ask for a motion to approve those, or no other questions? Adele, thank you so much. And Adele, thank you so much for sitting in for Tom this evening, and as our alternate, thank you. A second on that? Anyone?
Second.
Okay, so Adele and Cheryl on that, thank you very much. Okay. Oh, sorry, all in favor? Thank you. Okay, so at this point, we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, public comment. So we would invite any comments from the members of the public at this point.
I'd like to say a couple of things.
And if you could just state your name.
Sure, I will.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I'm not really good at public speaking, but I will do my best. My name is Kelly Cole, K-O-L-E. My last name is spelled. I live at 62 Sedgwick. I've been coming to these meetings I've been coming to these meetings, I don't know, for 8 months maybe. And I really feel that the decision that you made was forced through very fast, and that you did not really take a lot of consideration into the people who came to those meetings. The first meeting I came to, Pam, I remember you saying point blank, I quote, "Berms, berms, berms, that's all I hear about. There'll be no berms at Pear Tree Point Beach." Guess what? They're on the plan. They're on the master plan. They're on the architect's plan. I'm not sure what that's going to accomplish when you have a beach that's at sea level, that actually has a drain from the parking lot to the cove. And at high tide, where I was sitting there the other night at 10 o'clock, by the way, with my feet in the water, this close to the edge of the parking lot, and the drains pushing the water into the parking lot. It's not just the beach. It's the way the drain is set up. It's set up to drain into the parking lot. How are you gonna do that with berms there? How is that gonna work? Where are those berms gonna be? Where's the water going to go? Into the parking lot. You cannot move the water. It's going to find its way there no matter what you do. And I think those berms, your first storm, if we have another Sandy or when it comes, 100 years from now, it's gonna end up in the middle of that parking lot, not protecting it like you think it's going to. I really don't believe it's gonna work the way it does. And I would love for this commission to do a few studies, not on the ocean, by the way. We're on the sound. Very different way. It ebbs and flows. Very different. I asked Dave Campbell, you know what he said? That sand's gonna end up on my beach, which is right across from where that is. It's something you need to think about. I think that you're being, I don't know, I just feel it's really unnecessary money we're going to spend. Does there need to be things changed there? Absolutely. Do you need to fix the boat ramp? Absolutely, I get that. I do, I understand all that. I understand even the building. I'm not sure I want 2 stories, but I get it. I get nice bathrooms. I get that. I maybe even get a boardwalk on the front beach because it has a beach. But when you enter and you drive right in there, I don't know if you all saw my signs, but I was sitting there with picket signs because I wanted people to understand this is where you're putting those berms. This is where our cars, this is where we play. This is where your children are. And I just think you need to think harder about it. And I really wish you would spend the amount of time that I spend there. I am there 2 or 3 hours, 5 times a week. I love it. 2 meetings ago, you sat at a round table. 15 of you. Every single one of you had your doubts about those berms. Until you got to a woman named Lori, I believe her name was. And what did she say? I've been working for 15 years to get this done. You know what, Lori? I'm not sure where you are, but you should take a hint. We don't want it. 15 years is a long time to be working for sand on a beach. I've collected over 130 names that I sat there and did for about 3 hours every day from Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Of people who didn't even know there was a vote. Of people who use that beach. Of people who don't want you to do that stuff to it. And it's really frustrating when people come to these meetings and you kind of ignore everything we say. And I get that it's a lot easier to tell you don't do it than it is to say do it. But I do think you have to listen to the people who come forward. And I'm not sure there's a silent majority in here like she also said, that are not coming forward because they're afraid. That we're adults. This is our money. This is our town. This is where we live. Express what you'd like. There's a compromise to be had. You're not going to have it all your way because I'm not going to stop. I'm here and I'm not going to go away. I don't know what I have to do to bring awareness to all of you, but I think some of the stuff you're doing and the money you're spending, which of course right now we haven't got a budget, is excessive. It's a beach. Let it be a beach, not a playground, not a restaurant, not a dance hall. It's a beach. Please, please think about what you're doing. Please. I'm not really hopeful I'm going to do much by myself, but I am going to try, and I am going to keep on your backs, all of you. I live in this town. I love this town, and I'm not going to back down. But and I also want you to know I appreciate everything you're doing, because I do know this is part of the process. But I really hope that you would listen to the people who come here and express their wants and their needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Public comment? Great. Thank you very much. Okay, so moving on to the next item on our agenda. I just put a placeholder out here for a brief update and discussion on where we're at this point. Maybe a good place to start is we haven't, as a committee, had a chance, of course, since we haven't met since the commission meeting, to discuss any of what's transpired at the commission meeting. So I just invite, if that's a place to start, or if anybody would like to just kind of share any reflections on the commission meeting. I don't feel that it's necessary, but if anyone would like to, maybe that's a good place to start. And then I thought what we could do is just move on and just provide a brief update on our sense, Randy and my sense, of where Neo, Hauk, and Weston and Sampson are. So maybe I'll just open it up if anybody has any questions at this stage, and then we can move on.
Well, can you just update us? I mean, build new, but are we maintaining anything below, or are we not? Are
No.
we having elevators, or are we having ramps? Where are we? Are we gonna have a concession or not?
Mhm.
You know, where are we?
Yeah, so, you know, the minutes reflect, I think we all are aware, if there's a feeling that we should read through what the commission voted on, I'm happy to do that. You know, maybe that's a good place to start, so I'll take a moment and I'll just read through and then I'll come back to your questions. So, you know, we had, basically the way we structured the meeting with the commission, of course, I think, you know, that meeting was in response to, I think, kind of encouragement and urgings on the part of a few of the members of the committee over the course of the last few months to go back to the commission and get a sense from the commissioners to, you know, what they were thinking. And I guess the way to set some context, the way I saw it was that, you know, when the commission originally established that initial set of objectives, they're fairly general. They came out of the strategic plan. They came out of what Weston Sampson had offered up. And, you know, we as a committee now have been together for probably 8 months or so. And we've learned a lot. So it seemed as though it was a good point at which we could go back to the commission, share what we've learned, and then get the commission to weigh back in and give us some further guidance. So at the highest level, I guess at the principal level, well, first off, the commission's objective, let me just also maybe some further context just for the record. The discussion that we had with the commission on the 17th was purely about the building structures. So, you know, it would be my intent, if we're all feeling like that makes sense, to go back to the commission when we do have a better sense of where we are in terms of the environmental aspects of what we're discussing here. So the question of berms, whether there will be berms or not, what we're doing with the parking lot, you know, all of those elements. It's my sense, and I think Randy and I both feel the same way, that we just haven't progressed our thinking. We haven't gotten enough information back from Weston and Sampson on that. So it's the sense that in the same way that we went to the commission on the structural elements, we'd go back to the commission and get clarity on that. So in terms of the structural elements, basically the objectives that were set by the committee that were relevant for the conversation on the 17th, there were 3 of them. The first was, and once again these came out of the commission back in 2018, new elevated bathhouse concession building in the existing location. That was the first of the items. The second of the items that was relevant for the discussion at our last meeting was the addition of an outdoor dining area deck around a concession building, which was from concept B of the master plan. And then the third was flexible space for community use, and the fourth was add fishing pier. So it seemed as though the way to kind of have that conversation with the commission was, first off, identify whether from the commission's perspective they want to proceed with renovating the existing buildings or proceed with their original request of building something new and elevated. And then based upon that, we stepped through a series of kind of, I would call them like subsidiary elements. And so we walked through that. I thought there was a good open conversation with the commission, which was really the objective, to allow the committee to have a good dialogue with the commission on these. And to the extent that it was appropriate, maybe challenge a little bit or clarify something. To that end, then the commission then went through the exercise of voting following the discussion. And so on the element of new, renovate or build new, with one exception, which was an opposition from one of the members of the commission, the commission otherwise voted unanimously, with that one exception, to build a new elevated structure. And I'll go through these and then we'll come back and kind of clarify certainly what I think, but what we all feel is this translates to. And then the second of those elements, which was the outdoor dining deck, the commission voted unanimously to proceed with the building of an upper level deck for viewing and dining and flexible community space. So they rolled those 2 elements into one, took one vote, and that was unanimous. On the third element, for the ability to enclose this community space, is actually the 4th element on our list, but so the ability to enclose the community space, we're not sure what that really means. Could be some type of sliding doors or whatever. But the ability to close it so that it was protected from the elements. The commission voted unanimously to proceed with the providing the direction to us and the architects to enable that space to be enclosed. On the next, the ability to heat that, have heating for that space, which would imply the ability to use that space kind of in kind of extended season beyond the summer. The commission decided to postpone their decision on that, so we don't have a decision on whether or not that space would be conditioned or heated. On the next item around concessions, I think there was a good kind of a vigorous conversation around concessions. And the commission, I think, came away feeling as though they needed to do some more work on that before they could give the committee guidance on what they're asking us to do around concessions. And there were a few different options, ranging from building a new concession facility to using food trucks to maybe having no concession facility. And it's my sense that the commission is going off now and doing some further work and some further research, and will come back to us on that element. On another element, which was kind of element 7 in the kind of the menu that we had set up, which was integration with a gazebo, and there was a further one kind of expanded decks off the gazebo, which was element 8. So the ability to integrate that elevated structure to the gazebo and potentially kind of extend off the gazebo with some additional seating area. The commission voted unanimously to proceed with that. And then on the fishing pier, the commission decided to postpone their discussion, their decision around whether there would be a fishing pier or not. And there was some feedback from Dan Diggs from Weston Sampson on that, because there was some conversation around whether or not a potential place for that might be over the existing jetties or breakwaters. And I think Dan weighed in and suggested that that might be more complicated and more costly than the commission might have originally envisioned. So that is the record of what had happened over the course of that meeting. Back to your question now, maybe we can step through those elements one at a time. My sense, and then we can kind of go around here, but my sense is that ideally we want to preserve the restrooms on the ground level. And the way to preserve restrooms on the ground level is to preserve one of those two existing buildings. I think that's critically important from my perspective in terms of kind of the amenities that are available to the community and convenience for the community. And my sense is the commission gave us a green light on attempting to kind of preserve those buildings and work with the existing buildings. I don't think that's ambiguous in my mind. So I think what the commission basically directed us around that is to say, do what you can. If you could preserve those buildings, that's great. We'll get restrooms at the ground level. And then if not, of course, then the option is we'll have to have restrooms above. There's still some work to be done in terms of clarifying, from an approval perspective, precisely what has to be done to accomplish that. I think it's premature to kind of discuss that in more detail. I know Neil and company are going back now. There was some preliminary conversations with a person by the name of Diane Iskovich at the state level. You might remember that name because that name showed up in Jeremy's letter, and it's kind of was shared with us that he had exchanged some comments with Diane Iskovich around kind of elements of compliance. So I know there was some subsequent conversation. I don't think any of that is conclusive, but I do know there was an outreach, and at some point maybe we'll have to do our own separate outreach. But I think part of it had to do with it's a VE zone, the ability to allow water to flow through. There might have to be some adjustments. Once again, I'm kind of going out on a limb here, but there might have to be some adjustments made to those buildings to allow for, under flood conditions, to allow for water to flow through those. There was an interesting concept that was, once again, just briefly floated, no pun intended, by Neil and maybe Brian, and I think Brian O'Connor as well, maybe. We have limited budget for each of those buildings, so rather than trying to upgrade bathrooms in the existing building with the $30,000 that we might have, potentially kind of whatever we do with that front building, kind of take the $65,000 that I believe, roughly $65,000 that we have that are potentially available to us for the back building where the concession is, and remove the concession and use that money to put toilets in the back building. So I guess my only point here is there's a few different options that are being explored for how to do that. At the end of the day, we are gonna have to get a ruling as to whether or not we're allowed to do that. My feeling is that's one of the most important things for us to kind of really go to the mat on, if I can use that term. I think it's really critical. And I'm not sure what go to the mat means in this context. It's in terms of, you know, our own planning and zoning and the state and whoever else we have to talk to. But so that's my take on that. I don't know if anybody had a different take on that or any of the questions on that, but that's my take on that element.
My understanding is Neil's going back to both Jeremy and to the state to find out just what we can do with those buildings. You can't leave a massive block underneath an elevated structure because then the water's not going to flow through it. So how you get around that? You get rid of one of the, you put flood vents in all the buildings. That's kind of. And you asked about the elevator situation. I think that's kind of up in the air there.
No pun intended there.
Didn't even think of that. They're looking whether it's even practical. They had, the day of the meeting, they had gotten some input from some elevator people that it might well be possible. I personally don't think it is.
It sounded like an incredible amount of maintenance. I was gonna suggest that maybe one of you talk to Engine Tile of Public Works. I mean, we have an elevator at the train station in Darien, and it's been nothing but problems, and it's not even in a beach
I've never seen
environment.
that elevator.
And
Yeah.
the problem, interestingly, I don't mean to interrupt, but
Yeah,
the
no,
problem,
it's fine.
interestingly enough, was salt. There was
Yeah.
a lot of corrosion
Oh, yeah.
because they put salt on the platforms in the winter because it gets icy. So to me, salt and salt water, you know, there's so
Well,
much
interesting enough, we
correspondence.
have a good example with Groton Yacht Club, they have the elevator there too.
And I think he's a good source to consult. I mean, I don't think he's ever been through the building. I mean, it would be probably
Right.
worthwhile to have him do a walkthrough and
Yeah.
say, yes, this is a structurally sound building, or
Yep.
I've got concerns. I mean, I think,
Oh, yeah.
you know, I mean, he's a free resource and he's very
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
What's that?
At Gentile.
Oh, yeah?
He's
Oh,
great,
absolutely.
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, and I, to your point, Marlo, I think, you know, we should be tapping into whoever, you know, we've got resources within the town, so I don't think we've been shy up until now. We've certainly chatted with Ed at the outset, we've chatted with Jeremy. So to your point, I mean, I don't think we're gonna get anywhere down the road with the risk of kind of getting out ahead of ourselves here.
A comment about that meeting. I was surprised there was a vote taken. I really wanted to hear from the commission, but we couldn't get them to speak until finally Lori said, we'll take a vote. I was disappointed that let me say it, start another way. I thought it was a really good idea, Pam, for you to show them the emails that we received about that. But the hour was late when we started talking about this topic. We'd done a lot of other things in that meeting. Nobody had a chance to look at those, really. We started right in a discussion. So, you know,
They had all been forwarded to the commission earlier.
sure. I'm saying that the vote was taken before anybody read them.
No, they all got those previously.
Oh, they got those in advance?
Every time they came in, they went. That was just a formality of printing out
Oh, I
and
see.
having them.
Okay.
But all the commission members got those. Every time an email came in, they were forwarded to the commission. So they had them immediately.
Okay.
Sure.
Incidentally, just as a point of Robert's rules, those letters should be filed with the town clerk with everything.
Yeah, okay, I think they are though. I think you gave.
I have no idea, but I
Okay,
know
yeah, I
that
believe
should.
I believe
Okay,
they are.
Good.
Well, on that excuse me, on that subject, are our minutes filed in the town clerk's office or in your office?
Tomorrow.
Okay, so then all of that information should be filed with those minutes.
Yes.
Along with, I don't know that young girl's name, she had a petition or something that she had passed out. That should also be filed with the minutes. well, she didn't pass it out, she talked about it, but she had,
Yeah, kind of the survey that.
yeah, the survey,
Yeah.
not a
Oh,
petition,
yes,
the
right,
survey
yeah.
that she had done.
Hmm.
I think that should be also
I don't
given to
recall
us.
who.
This is
The
TR.
social media.
Tier,
TR kind of doing
yeah.
an official survey
Oh,
for
right, but
friends.
she didn't give,
That's not official, yeah.
Well, she had,
it wasn't part of it.
I think it was more
It
like
was at
she-
the meeting and she discussed it at a meeting.
And she-
I would just like to, so I think we're just venturing into, like kind of
Well,
administrative aspects of the
I have something
commission.
to say about the commission meetings, so.
Okay, yeah, no, that's.
I'd like to just do a couple of things before my brain goes out the window.
Just, Martha, are you happy with answers to your questions?
Yeah, okay, so.
You asked about the
But
ramps.
how are we gonna move forward here? How's the architect gonna move forward? And also like the flexible space, how big is it going to be? Is it going to be year-round? Is it going to be seasonal? I mean, how does he proceed if he doesn't know this? I feel like we have a lot of loose ends, and we can't proceed until those are wrapped up.
I think on the seasonal aspect of it, he felt that, meaning heated or not, he felt as though, Neil and Brian felt as though they could proceed with kind of dealing with kind of heating that enclosed space later on. So I don't think that's holding them up at all. I'm not sure, I mean, I think we have some fairly clear direction in terms of the core elements now. I mean, I kind of established this list with Neil before we went to the commission. And the way I did that is I asked Neil, you need to tell us what you need to know from us in order to enable you to kind of take the next step and continue forward. So I think the way this is going to unfold now is, and those guys, I mean, we've moved the meeting out to the end of August for a couple of reasons. A few of us are not here in mid-August, but also I think both Neil and Weston Sampson felt as though they could benefit from having a bit more time, do a bit more research, try to nail down some things. So what I'm anticipating is they're going to come back to us at the end of August on both tracks, the structural track and the environmental track, and we'll start to go through a process of having them present and having us weigh in and kind of and refining, what they're presenting to us. In a way, I think the example is, at one point we had an option for 2,000 square feet of flexible community space, and we now have an option for 400 square feet. So I think it's a demonstration that the committee.
Is that where we are now? But now
Well, I'm
you're
not-
gonna put the lifeguards up there, which I don't know if that's such a wise idea to have the lifeguards
Yeah,
sitting on the second floor.
I think if we can preserve the buildings, a building below, I think that's a place for the lifeguards. So I think there's still some, of these kind of, if then else's that we still have to go through. And it just seems to me, based upon the way we've operated, that, that we'll have a healthy discussion around everything that these guys present to us, and we'll make a determination what makes sense. I'm
No,
not sure
I mean,
how
but
else
I
to do
hate to
it.
have them keep spinning their wheels. I mean, so when he does a platform, is he gonna have a concession on it, or isn't he? I don't think he should move forward until somebody's
Well,
made
if
a
we-
decision on that.
It's a good.
And are we happy with the size at 475? And how many bathrooms are we thinking of up on the top?
Yeah.
I
yeah.
mean, is he
So-
gonna determine it all, or are we gonna?
Well, so let me just try to, so some of this is unknown, but I think some of it's known. I think what Neil has told us is that the footprint that he's established right now, that he demonstrated to us in the model, can accommodate a concession facility, accommodate a flexible community space of roughly 400 square feet. There's an open space in between those two structures. What Neil has indicated is if you can't put bathrooms on the ground level, then that open space in the center potentially could become space that could be used. So my sense is he feels as though, once again, I don't think I'm misreading here, I think this is what he's directly told us, he feels as though with that current footprint and what he's kind of working with and what he's presented to us up until now, that he can proceed with, even with the unknowns, and come back to the committee with something that we can begin to kind of deliberate over. So to your point, I think he feels he can proceed, even though he hasn't gotten the commission to weigh in on a concession. Now, part of this is we've got to get an answer from the commission on the concession soon. I mean, it can't go on forever. So, and certainly in terms of my role in the commission, I'm going to continue to remind the commission that they can't leave these elements outstanding. I think I'll take my guidance from Neil on those items until in other words, look to him to tell us, hey, look, I've gone far enough and I can't do anything more until you're more precise on this. but I don't feel as though, I mean, I came away feeling as though we had enough clarity. And once again, I'll just go back to what I said earlier. The list was developed with Neil in terms of, asking him, what do you need from us?
Yeah.
So, great questions, but I think, my sense is he's able to kind of come back to us, at least with one more round of something.
I think he'll also come back, he wasn't really, he wasn't sure if you were gonna put heating and air conditioning in that space, how much real estate that's gonna take.
Right.
And then if you have to have, if we can't have bathrooms downstairs, we have to move the bathrooms upstairs, that's really a whole other,
Ballgame, yeah.
whole other thing, it's a whole other ballgame. So, I think you'll see a little firmer definition of what's possible on the 28th.
I mean, the only other thing I guess, maybe just, because I did chat a little bit with Neil about this, and that's kind of like the vernacular, just because I'm guessing his questions, I call it like the vernacular of the building, like what style of the building we're talking about, and like the kind of what it's going to ultimately look like, because right now we're just dealing with kind of masses of structures, and that's down the road. I mean, that's down, that's further on down, and just as we've discussed everything else, when we get to that point, those are decisions that the committee will have to make. I mean, because I don't think the consent. So here's a case where I don't believe the commission said, build a new building that looks like this. I think they said build a new building, and I think that may be a detail that's kind of up to the committee now for us to weigh in on. So that's another element. Cheryl, you had something?
Yeah, I do. I've been making my notes so I don't forget. First off, if we were to switch the buildings and put the bathrooms where the lifeguard, where the concession stand building is, there is no sewer line over in that area. So we have to consider the amount of money a sewer line would cost us to put the bathrooms over there. Water's over there.
It's about 15 feet away, though, right?
Right, but you still have to,
Yeah.
the whole thing's
I'm
gonna
with
be
you.
dug up and put a sewer line in. So that's a consideration that I haven't
There has to be
heard.
sewer for the concession, though, right?
There's gotta be sewer
Got to be a sink drain.
for the sink trains.
Well, there's not a sewer line for a toilet.
I don't,
So
Yeah.
that's a little
Right.
different, but anyway.
That's a good point.
And what I heard from Neil all this time was that the $30,000, we could renovate the bathrooms downstairs. And then the other night at the commission meeting, I thought and I watched that meeting over and over and over again on 79 and on the computer, was that we may not have enough money to renovate the buildings, the bathrooms. So I'm a little confused on what exactly he thinks we need there. My interpretation of a clean new bathroom would be a self-sustaining bathroom with fiberglass stalls that won't rust, that don't have metal, that are waterproof, handicap toilets, something to, and have the design of floor plan B, which is the handicap bathroom here. And make sure the doorway is usable for wheelchairs and whatnot. So I really would like him to, at some point, come back with a true figure on this, because to me, it's extremely important to have the bathrooms downstairs. I've said it right from the beginning. I'm not changing my tone on that. Another thing is the boat ramp. We really haven't gotten into that yet, and I understand why. But I think that we should start to really dwell on the boat ramp, because it's going to, I've asked the question 3 or 4 meetings ago, how long is it going to take to get the permit? Are we going to do maintenance dredging? What's the story there? And I haven't had an answer yet. So to me, that's a little piece of the puzzle that's over there. And I'd like us to get, at the next meeting, an answer to those questions, to see where we can dredge, how much we have to dredge, where we can put the material that we're dredging. Randy, you know about that. And if it's a maintenance permit, or how to go about that, and how long it's going to take us. because I'd like to get that process started now. Because I think that's a different process than the bathhouse, the berms, the parking lot, and the rest of it. The parking lot will just be reconfigured. It's not going up, it's not going down, it's gonna be there. So I think that that's a process that's gonna take a long time. I'm not sure, I don't know for a fact, because I haven't gotten my answers. So I'd like to see that if we can get that as an agenda item for next meeting and a vote on that, so that we can find out what it's gonna cost, where, and how much time is involved in this. So that I'd like to have on the agenda for next month so that we can move something along here. On another note, out of the commission meeting,
Can I just clarify? And we can talk about it when we get to the next meeting, but the vote you're asking for would be for what?
to go ahead and vote to go with the process, to go ahead and get the permits. I believe we should vote on that.
So
Maybe
to-
we don't need to, I
So
don't
to
know.
proceed.
To
kind of-
proceed with the permit process, to go to the, what's it, DEP, the Army Corps of Engineer, and the design of the boat ramp, and find out all
So
that
to really to
stuff.
commence with the boat ramp in advance of the other elements.
Right, I think that needs to be moved on here. And I think we can get along with that while we're still having discussions on the rest of this. Because I think this is gonna be a process.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it seems like it's a given. I think everybody agrees.
Mhm.
Yeah, everybody agrees with this.
But now are we assuming we've got to get probably a cost at that point? I mean, are you?
Right, I would like to
you
know,
because-
yeah, I would like to know from Neil what his projection costs are. I mean, at this time, let's just say hypothetically, 79, that it's gonna cost
X.
X, okay? And we can just, work with
Yeah,
that.
we
We're
understand.
not voting on money, we're
Well, we're
not,
gonna have to go through an approval process
That's
for
down the
funding.
road.
No, I would imagine, I don't mean no here, let me clarify. If I'm understanding what you're asking, if we are voting to commence with that, I think what you're asking then is to kind of separate that element out from the other elements and go through the approval process for that element in advance of the other elements, which means we'd have to go to the Board of Selectmen, we'd have to go to probably Planning and Zoning, we'd have to go through basically all the approval gates for that as an individual element, in the same way that we're gonna have to do for every other element when we get to that. That would be my
Well,
sense.
what I'm asking for is the permit process. We may end up all together. If we have to go for a permit, it may take 6 months,
Mhm.
let's just say. So in that 6 months, we may have a plan for the building. In that 6 months, we may have the whole kit and caboodle
Mm.
to know that we need to go to the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and the RTM for X amount of dollars. So it could wrap up all at one point.
Mhm.
What I'm saying is, this is gonna take, the permit process is taking the length of
Yeah,
time.
no, I understand
And
what
we
you're
can
saying.
move that forward,
Mhm.
just to get the permits. And if we need a price, I don't know, when you do a permit, do you need a price attached to
No,
that?
but you need a design.
Okay, so
You need
we
a
need to get
construction
Neil to
drawings.
do this design,
Yeah, that would be Weston and
Says
Sampson.
Weston
I mean
But-
Weston and
But
Sampson,
I understand what you're.
and get that design going, and get moving on that part.
Yeah.
So
And
that,
that avoids it being a delay on
Yeah.
the
Yeah, I
project.
think
Yeah,
that's a
that's
very
right.
good idea.
okay, thank you. Next on my list is, from the commission meeting, is I was a little taken back on, and I've heard it being said at other meetings that I've watched on television on 79, and taken back on the comment that we're not hearing from the other side, that we're not hearing from the people that like this whole concept of all these drawings that we have here. And I'm taken back because I think we have heard a lot of positive feedback on some of the designs that we have here. From what I'm hearing, everybody likes the idea of a new bathroom, clean sand and new sand, new grills and picnic area, planting of the trees, the boat ramp. Everyone that I've talked to and have talked to, on the beach and in the supermarket and wherever, all said, oh yes, I really want this beach picked up and cleaned up, and I've been waiting a long, long time to have clean sand and to have a bathroom that we can use and blah, blah, blah. So there are people that have said there are concepts of this drawing that they like. There are people that have said, I don't want the berms. I don't see that they're gonna do anything. There's 25-foot openings. I've had people look at the plans, all the plans that I've carted around with me in my car, and everybody wants more trees for shade. And I just think that I was taken back on that, and that I think people are embracing a lot of this. And whether or not they embrace a 2-story building, that's yet to be seen. Whether or not they embrace the configuration of a parking lot. But I mean, the rest of it is something that this whole town and the community will embrace and has. So I'm a little frustrated on hearing people say they're not hearing from the people that really want this. Because I've heard some people said, yeah, I mean, I've talked to people that said, oh, I like the berms, I think they'll be pretty. They're like Weed Beach. I say, okay, fine. I just ask people what you think.
Yeah.
I don't put ideas in their heads or anything else. I'm trying to get the community's feedback on the whole situation. We've got numerous plans here. They've all seen numerous plans. Some of them like this one, some of them like that one. And I'm getting feedback from a lot of people. And I think that it's unfair to say that the community isn't behind us or isn't embracing all of this. So that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, thank you very much. By the way, just one clarification. The commission, we may have touched on it, I have to go back and look at the video, but the discussion around berms was not an element that was discussed in any formal way with the commission on the 17th.
Yep.
And I, you know, and as I said, you know, like that's something for further discussion. It's unclear what we're doing with that. More work has to be done, and so I just wanted to kind of, you know, clear that up or clarify that.
I'd like to follow up on that, the dune discussion, which we had a long time discussing before, but, you know, I've read every beach in Connecticut is different. Every beach, you know, there's some extreme erosion, some is minimal erosion. Sometimes dunes are the answer, sometimes dunes are not. Dunes are primarily used to protect upland property. I would suggest, you know what, we're talking to a landscape architect. I think it would behoove us to hire a coastal engineer, and I'm not afraid that the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance would not approve some money to us to actually hire a real coastal engineer to take a look at our beach and see, are we eroding or aren't we eroding? What is the best solution? And it's, as my reading has shown, sometimes the best solution is to do nothing. Or, you know, I don't know what the answer is. I want to do the right thing, but none of us really know what the right thing is, and I think a coastal engineer would assist us in that. So I feel that would be a worthwhile expenditure if we don't have the money within the project.
I think that's somewhat the new addition to Weston Sampson had that coastal.
Yeah, so
Interesting.
Randy and I had a brief follow-up conversation, you know, as we were kind of sorting out the next meeting with Neil and Dan, and you know, in that conversation, we raised that point exactly. You know, look, to your point, I mean, we hired Weston and Sampson. We didn't hire one individual within Weston and Sampson. Weston and Sampson is a very large firm that has, you know, a great depth of cross-functional kind of expertise, including coastal engineering. We hired an engineering firm. So the request that we've made is go back to your bench and bring somebody back to the table who is an expert. We want to understand the science behind this.
And make sure it's a coastal engineer, because I
Of
did
course.
look at the presentation and I looked at all the backup people, and there were civil engineers and structural engineers,
what we'll
but
do is
nowhere
we'll-
did I see mentioned a coastal engineer.
Yeah, so.
And there is a difference, I think.
Well, they did just bring on board a Weston Sampson, a woman that's
Coastal,
has a PhD in coastal engineering.
that's great, good.
And they also have that expertise. I mean, Cheryl, you've been to the Byram Park
Yeah,
off
I've been there too.
of exit two.
Which
I mean,
park?
that was-
Byron.
all that engineering in there, that was all Weston and Sampson.
Well, that maybe they could come at the
Yes.
next meeting and talk
Agree
to us
100%.
about what,
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
And we
once
made
they've
that,
looked at the beach, not
Yeah.
prior to it,
Yeah.
but.
we made that point to Dan and Neil both, that we need to understand the science behind this thing.
Exactly.
Not just the idea that this will help,
We have no
tell me,
idea at this
You know,
point.
give me the engineering
Yeah.
solution for the project.
And also, I think we need to understand the problem, as you're
Exactly.
saying, is we might be solving for the wrong thing. So let's find
Yeah.
out, what are we really trying to solve for?
And we may have actually kind of established like, maybe a problem that's just, wrong choice of words, but it's like, maybe it's like simplistic, and we're, like they say when all you have is a hammer, everything's like a nail. I mean, the problem as it was defined in the strategic plan is keep the sand off the beach.
Yeah.
We may determine that we can live with sand on the beach and, or, just, I'm not sure, like to your point, we have to go back to what is the fundamental problem. And in solving the issue of preventing sand from washing up on the parking lot, it's the question that I asked Dan, are we establishing some other unintended consequence now?
Exactly.
So that goes back to the science of it, and I agree. I mean, we should get back to the problem, what is the problem that we're really solving for?
Yes.
Yeah.
And just as a point, the last sand replenishment at Pear Tree was in 2008.
Mm.
There was a very minimal delivery. I guess there was a little left over from a weed replenishment, so they put a very little amount
Yeah.
on Pear Tree.
So that was much earlier, not 2008.
2000,
Because
that's the information I was
No,
given.
2015.
Was when a minimal replenishment at Pear
Right.
Tree.
Before that may have been 2008.
Right, so basically, 10 years,
Right.
we have not had to replace the sand.
And
Mhm.
from what I understand too, because we didn't
We
chat about this, we didn't talk about it, I just gave you figures. But according to Jim Comm, who's been with the town for quite a long time, that was, they tried to replenish every couple of years, which is really rather unusual. You talk to all the towns around us, they don't do that. Darien was kind of on a schedule of replenishing, and it wasn't as if,
Yeah.
right, did they need to, did not need to? I found that really very aggressive, that they were replenishing every 2 years. And so are neighboring towns, like, they don't do that at all. So, interesting.
I think that the element is that the sand is dirty. The sand is dirty because we scrape it up off the parking lot and put it back on the beach.
Mm.
But I hear that at Weed Beach, and we don't do that at Weed Beach. Because we have
We
have people that say there's
But this
dirty
was
sand
real.
there too.
Cheryl, for
Yeah.
years, Cheryl, I mean,
Yeah.
Now,
this- yeah.
what happens was we take the snow from downtown Darien and we dump it in mounds at Pear Tree
In the parking lot.
in the parking lot. And one year there was a grocery cart in the middle of the parking lot when the snow melted, along with a lot of trash, garbage cans and everything else. And I think once we do this, I don't think we should be doing that anymore. Find another place to dump it.
They
like
used
the
to dump
dumpsters.
it at Weed, so, I mean, I don't know
Yeah,
that
they
that-
used to dump it at Weed years ago, but now because the configuration of the
Ah,
parking lot, there's really no big space
Yeah.
to dump a huge mound of snow. Now, years ago, the kids were sleigh riding down this mound of snow in the middle of the parking lot at Pear Tree. So all of these chemicals from all the streets and everything are all over this parking lot. So what I think, when and if the sand gets washed into the parking lot, it should be removed and not replaced back on the beach. It should be removed to the dump.
Then you're gonna really need a replacement program.
But we did
Sure.
replace the sand. I have to go back because when I was chairman of Park and Rec for years, it was a standing joke when I got up at the budget hearing and said, everybody's like sitting there, did she get the sand? No, nope, I didn't get the sand. So it was what we tried to do was every other year. 1 year weed, 1 year pear tree. And then we started to do weed. And so we got a little more sand at pear tree at one point. And that was before 2008. Then everything stopped. And we didn't get any sand from 2008 on. So that's what, 10, 12, 11 years. Right. So the only thing we did get at one spot was over by the flagpole at Pear Tree. It was because they had a little left over at weed. And you can see the difference in the sand in that area, amazingly enough still. But that's all we got. So I think what we, it would be nice to have nice clean sand down there and not keep putting it back from the dirty parking lot.
Okay.
And just, do they have a mechanical rate for working sand?
Yes.
Yeah.
That we,
Oh, yeah.
they regularly.
It's not the, it's
And
not
pear
that,
tree.
it's not stuff you see.
Right.
Right,
Yeah.
right, they do regular.
Okay. Any other observations from the meeting of the commission?
We also have to resolve the police issue.
Yes.
I understand now that it was almost a budgetary issue. The oil was stored at Pear Tree because there is a maintenance garage at the police station and they have a barrel of oil. And this person is long gone, but they were afraid that if they had 2 oil barrels in the maintenance station, some of the marine people would take from the patrol oil or
Oh, I
vice
see.
versa, and it would be confusing.
Huh.
That's what I've heard. The fellow is long gone. It seems an easy issue to solve.
Yeah.
It just seems that if that's what the purpose is,
Yeah.
it should go back to maintenance.
Or, I mean, how much oil can we use, really?
Yeah.
Well, they're buying it in these 50-gallon drums as a, for a course.
I mean,
Right, but I mean, they can
Yeah.
drain it off into one
Yeah.
of those red jugs and
Yeah.
carry it to the boat
Yeah.
for the times that they need to do
For
it.
those engines that they have on the police boat, they have a separate oil reservoir?
I have no idea.
No idea, but
I haven't had my ride yet. I don't know.
I saw them speed off in a blaze the other day.
Mm.
Yeah, they're outboard engines, so don't you mix it with the gas?
Oh,
Not
they can be
always.
My
four, they
husband
can be
does.
4-cycle outboards and they can just use oil like a car.
Oh, okay.
If they're 2-cycle engines, they have to mix oil. They're 2 cycles?
They're 2 cycles.
We're not supposed to talk about all this. Then there's a separate oil reservoir in the boat that maybe holds a gallon or 2 and mixes it as it's
It actually doesn't seem to make sense in a building that occasionally floods to have a barrel of oil.
Yeah.
I don't think either.
Yeah, I'm suspecting we're probably gonna get to a point where, on this particular item, where we're gonna have to simply say, this is all the space you have. Like, it seems to be a little bit of a reluctance, maybe I might be handling it the same way if I were in their shoes, to kind of commit to kind of giving up space. But I think sooner or later, to your point, we're gonna have to make a decision on it, and I think we'll just figure out what, the use for the rest of the space, and then go back and say, here's how much we can give you. That's an approach, I don't know. I mean, if we can get an answer in advance of that, that'd be great also.
Now, you mentioned that Neil Hawk is talking with, I guess, Deep about the bathrooms and whatnot. I assume he's also talking with them to find out if the
This is
decking-
FEMA, actually.
Okay.
I think Diana.
All right, well then,
Yeah.
is somebody touching base with Deep in terms of, do we know even that the decking proposal around the gazebo would be allowed? I
My
think
understanding is that there had been an indication that would be allowed.
that they've touched base with
Yes.
somebody at the state.
Yes,
Okay,
exactly.
that's
Same
good to
same
know.
person, Diana Skivich.
Okay, good.
I believe Neil did that in advance of him kind of sharing that option with us.
Okay.
Okay, so that's that. We've got Neil and Weston and Sampson with us at the end of the month. And we'll see what they come back with, and then, I would expect we'll have a good, healthy conversation around whatever they're presenting us with.
Back to decks for a minute. I know the boat club went to great expense because they're in the high velocity flood zone.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this property is also in the high velocity flood zone.
Yep.
So I'm a great proponent of the decks. I think it'd be very popular. It would really add a lot to the beach. But I'm a little concerned about able to do them. For example, the boat club deck is built on piles
Yep.
driven into sand.
Mm-hmm.
But clearly, there's bedrock
Yep.
under the gazebo.
Right.
And I don't know what difference that makes. So I'm not saying it's a problem, I'm saying it's a question.
Yeah, I have the same question. I mean, Neil shared a bit when he had that conversation, without going into a great deal of detail, just to say it would be allowed, but we didn't get into kind of the structural aspects of how it would be accomplished. But I mean, I'm not an engineer, but I would imagine bedrock, exposed bedrock, may in fact even be a little, maybe it's not easier, but it may be a better solution than having to go drive piles through sand. So I don't know enough about it to kind of, but it's a question, and they're going to have to answer those questions for us. Yeah.
Okay, good.
And I think a good question is, okay, so you've got these additional surfaces now that are out in the wind. I mean, like how sustainable are they? I mean, the first big windstorm, do you end up with something that's in somebody's front yard? So I think we have a responsibility to understand, ask those questions and understand the answers around those.
I think there's another question to ask about those decks with respect to, if the purpose is really to have space where you can appreciate the views. I know at the boat club we had to put up a railing to a certain code, which actually makes it difficult to access the views. So it is something to really think about as well.
Yeah.
How, what kind of barrier do we have to put up
Right.
to protect the.
And does it defeat the purpose?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there are all kinds of solutions so that you can still capture the views, but just
Sure.
worth keeping that in mind.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, if you have a second floor deck, you'll be looking into the trees, into the gazebo roof too. That lines up the way I've stood there and looked at it, and stood in the gazebo and looked over to the top of the roof line. You're looking into the treetops, and you're not being able to see out into the Long Island Sound. You're more or less looking into the, across to the yacht
Well,
club.
from that direction, but not
Right, but if you look to
from a
this,
different direction.
if you look
just
straight
front
out,
front.
if you take the top of you take this deck here, let's just say, and you're looking out,
Right, that direction.
well, I mean, yeah, you're looking out to the,
Right, that direction.
to the boats all moored out there, and out to Long Island Sound. The trees are here, so you're sitting looking into the treetops. So that's another, consideration when thinking about this deck up there,
I do think we
how
have.
it would
I think.
go around.
Yeah, no, it's a good point you're making. I do think landscaping is an aspect of this that we haven't yet gotten to. And
Well,
that tree there it's a mulberry tree. I've heard people complain about the fact that you get late in the season and you can't really sit under
Well,
that tree
if
with the
you-
droplet stuff. Well, I'm just saying.
I
we
mean, I'm
haven't
not
been-
gonna,
Look, I understand there's a lot of sacred cows here.
there's,
but,
well, I mean,
like,
that
yeah.
tree is, the biggest tree we have down there for the shade. And
I'm with you.
It could be, seven families can sit underneath that tree on a hot day. So, I mean, it's not something that,
by the way, I
it
didn't.
needs to be trimmed, it needs to be pruned.
Yeah.
But, then there's a tree on the backside of the
I
gazebo.
thought it might have been you who referenced the mulberries.
Yeah, they're there for about 5 days.
Okay.
The geese like them.
Pick up mess.
That's about it. I mean, after, out of 5 months of, sitting.
No, I love trees, don't get me wrong.
Right.
I mean, so, I'm a tree
I love
person.
children too.
Right, yeah, right. I love dogs, I love.
Go back to the bathhouse for 1 second. Randy, when we went over to the yacht club, and you just hit on it a couple minutes ago, if we were to put those vents through this building, are they an expensive, what are they made out of? I mean, I don't want metal anywhere around this
Well,
place because it
they're
rusts.
they're galvanized steel.
Okay,
You-
so it won't rust.
um, They're eventually galvanized, but they're replaceable parts. I've never seen them made out of plastic.
Okay.
But if you go around, particularly in the Road Bay, if you go around the Road Bay, they're in every foundation.
Right.
And, I don't know if just the vents alone, given that the yacht club is not in the VE zone.
Right.
It's just one step
Right.
back. And once you're in the VE zone, I'm not sure that just flood vents alone solve the
Yes.
problem.
With the water flowing through there.
That's
Right.
Oh, I just wanted to
Yeah.
know. I'd like to have the building inspector go down there and see what he thinks about how sound this building is, and if it's structurally sound to put a second floor on top of it.
No,
If we could arrange for something like that.
We can't touch,
the second floor will not touch it.
it's not gonna be
It'll be
directly on
built
top.
above it and around it.
If you're gonna be able to keep the
Oh,
building.
that's right. I thought it was gonna sit on it.
No.
Okay.
And you
That's
can
why I'm
imagine
a-
we're gonna have to go through probably the architectural review board, and, you know, everybody else will have to go through a number of gates here to get approval for any structural changes we're making, so.
Okay.
That'll happen,
I
no
forgot
question
about
about it.
that. Sorry.
So, I know it's early, but the sooner we can see an elevation,
Yes.
so we see what those ramps look like from the ground,
Mhm.
the happier I'll be. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, we don't really know what we're looking at yet. And I know we're just at schematic
Yeah,
stage, I understand that, but the sooner I see it, the happier I'll be.
understood.
They have CAD/CAM programs that I'm sure
Yeah.
they're doing this on the, you know.
By the way, one of the reasons why we discussed the elevators at the outset, and we just kind of like moved beyond that for the reasons we discussed.
Elevations,
No, I'm talking about elevator now. So,
All right.
what I was saying,
You change the subject.
no, I haven't changed the subject, deal, that's my point. So we discussed elevators when we first got together, and we kind of dismissed it because of the weather and salt. But one of the reasons we reintroduced the concept of elevator, you know, in the last few sessions, is as a substitute for ramps.
Hmm.
Right, so the ramps are for ADA accessibility. You know, once you go up, you need ramps to comply with ADA accessibility. If you had an elevator, you could kind of you'd be in compliance by use of the elevator, and then you can have stairs. So that's the other reason why we've suggested going back and relooking at, you know, use of an elevator.
Well, that's good. Well, Randy knows something about having an elevator where the works are
Yeah,
up above.
Yeah,
yeah,
everything's up top, and the default setting for the elevator is on the second floor. So even if all the power goes out, the car is still on the second floor.
Hmm.
So, I mean, we did ask Neil to go back and, as we're saying here, kind of explore the possibility of an elevator that, you know, would have the type of technology that doesn't require daily maintenance, it could live in that type of an environment, and can deal with the salt air and that type of thing. So I think it's an answer that for that reason, so we can kind of have an option, you know.
Again, I would suggest you talk to Ed Gentile also. I mean, it's good to get a second opinion on that.
We'll talk to whoever we need to talk to.
No, I know,
yeah.
but I'm just
Yeah.
saying very specifically,
Yeah.
I think
No,
there
but,
should be something done
absolutely.
prior to our next meeting.
Well, I'm not sure about whether we'll get to it by the next meeting, but we have hired an architectural firm, and they're experts.
I'll talk to him if you'd like.
You can talk to whoever, I mean, no one's preventing, there's no gag order here. You know, any member of the committee can
No,
talk to
I
whoever,
just
and we
think it's a
appreciate you guys
really-
bringing information
yeah.
back to the meeting, you know, so
Yeah,
that's how
I'll
we're all
be happy
learning as
to.
we go along. Anything else on, as we're kind of talking through here, that we'd like to just cover before we move to the next item on the agenda?
I had one question when we were talking about the amounts that are available for the rehab of the lower floor buildings. And there seemed to be an allocation for one building and an allocation for another building. Is that cut in stone? You can't commingle those funds and have no, okay, that's,
Two separate buildings.
Yeah.
We've checked that with Jeremy.
Yes, you know, one thing we could do theoretically is attempt to have the appraisal increased.
right.
It's a waterfront property, it must be worth Millions.
I'd buy that building for $35,000 in a heartbeat, you know, so.
I mean, I will volunteer myself to talk to the assessor just to understand how
Sure.
they set the price
That'd be great.
and to ask him if, I doubt it, but
Please,
is
that'd
there
be great.
any flexibility to
Nobody goes to
reconsider?
them and asks to have a value increased.
Well,
Well,
Lori
That was
suggested,
shocking.
Well, no, the suggestion did come up the other night. so
Yeah,
I-
Lori
it
came
does
up
make
with the-
sense.
and
yeah,
said
I think
maybe
it's a
we should
good point,
get
we might as well at least
an
understand
appraised
it.
value, and you can hire 3 real estate agents to go down there and look at it. Plus, somebody said there was a 3-year look back. Have we put anything into that building other than that new pump for the bathrooms this year?
Very little.
Nothing that adds to the,
So Martha, if you could, I mean, if
Yeah, no,
you'd
I'm
like
happy
to
to
that'd be
do
great.
that.
To
That's
go
a
back
good
and help us
idea.
understand what the story is with that,
Yeah.
would be great. Thank you.
And then that means that they appraise each building separately, they don't appraise it as a combined.
Yes, and it's not only the
Yeah,
buildings,
check
it's,
that.
Size,
Maybe just
That's,
put
that's the
size.
way it's
Maybe
shown.
that could give us some
Square footage.
flexibility.
Which is square footage.
That's
Yeah.
the way it's shown on the card, and yet they're connected by that common roof.
Right,
well, they even, I mean, they even provide a separate value for the awning that's out, that shuts out. The gazebo has its own value, the boat ramp has its own value. So, would you like to know what those values are? 'Cause I have
Well,
I
I
have
have
it
it here
too.
too, but.
I wouldn't spend a lot of time.
No, I'm just gonna try
If
to
they're- no, no.
understand.
Well,
If I
who
were the
do,
assessor,
who could we get,
Nobody's paying
who would
taxes.
contact the real estate brokers to get an unappraised
Well,
value?
Martha's just volunteered to go off and kind of
I'll-
provide,
I'll-
get some,
let's-
do some
let's
research
start
and come
with
back
the
to us.
assessor, and then if we
Okay.
decide to go further, we can.
And this
Okay.
is this is the one that was updated as well, I guess. Let's see what this is here. I think this is the most current.
I think too.
I'm not sure this is the most current one. What do you think?
From our meetings.
Somewhere.
Oh, there was a,
We
there
had
was
it
a,
earlier.
About
when I
17.
got it. You got it, exactly what it is.
This is, oh, printed on.
I know I have it.
yeah. So basically, I think, so this is the.
Building, not so much.
The restrooms are valued at, so this is the 50% rule now, the restrooms, I believe I'm looking at the most current one, the restrooms are valued at $58,300. So we have 50% of that to spend on a restroom. The kiosk is valued at $130, we have 50% to spend on the kiosk. The canopy for the restroom, I think, is this, canopies on both sides, I think, kind of like shut out in front, right? Roughly $2,000 each. Trying to find where the gazebo is here.
You sure that's not one of the
What's the
canopies?
date of the one you're looking at, Lou?
It's not-
Yeah,
This is
that may be
April
the canopy.
15th, 2019.
Okay.
Oh, this is
Oh,
Well, they
November
got two
5th.
canopies.
2018.
Yeah, that's the original one that we had gotten.
Yeah, I had followed up separately.
Yeah.
Kiosk.
So I thought,
This was in my report that went back to the commission on April 24th, that I shared with everybody.
What's the date of that?
Then it's gotta be the gazebo.
April,
kiosk,
What was the number for the kiosk again?
yeah, so the
130,000.
yeah, the value of the kiosk is 130,000. And then the value of the restroom is 58,300. So the amount of money we'd have to spend on the restroom at the moment is 26,150. And the amount of money we'd have to spend on the kiosk
I
is
I don't understand.
65.
Kiosk is the concession.
I've got a residential property record card from Tyler dated 2017.
Yeah, that's the original.
Yeah, that's-
we got.
that's all
Then
the
Mike
information.
followed up and
Yeah,
got,
this was information that I shared with the committee and the commission in my report
This is
on April
2017.
24th.
So it's 130 for the concession stand, and how much for the bathroom?
58,300,
58,300. And of that, we get
50%.
50%, so it's 26,
Actually, it's
24.
29.
29.
What number are you looking at? I'm looking at
This is mine is
78.
obsolete.
Okay, this is.
And so
Yeah, by the way, this is,
Yeah, okay.
I don't know if you guys
I'll look at the new one.
recognize this document, but I shared this with the committee and the commission. This was my update to the Parks and Recs Commission on April 24th. And it's in that document.
I don't have
I believe I shared it with everybody.
It's all right, you know, you just go on the
I don't-
assessor's
I don't
page and
think so.
you look it up.
April 20.
It's-
it. Whatever, it's okay.
No, but-
Look, I'm not gonna argue that anybody's wrong on a town document, all right? Let's let it go.
Well,
Yeah, I don't know if it's
I
wrong
will
or right.
let
I mean,
it
that's the number
I
that's
will-
on the card.
You guys got the document, fine.
well, what they
Are we
do-
questioning whether it's the right number or not, or?
No,
Yeah.
No.
No, you were looking
Just don't
for the
ask me.
gazebo, but you didn't, it wasn't in there?
I think the gazebo was like 40,000, but I'm not.
You know,
There ought to
it's-
be a way to-
I would think personally that they would do it on a replacement basis. Because that must have been a value to them.
Martha, do we have?
No, I was just ruminating about how we would value the land,
Right,
the private
right.
building. But
I agree.
have no
I mean,
idea, so,
But it's the value of the building, the land doesn't count.
yeah, and the land is very valuable. I was just thinking maybe they could do it on a replacement basis, but who knows? I'll find out from him how to do it.
I'm reluctant to move to the next item on the agenda. New business. Anyone have anything else they'd like to discuss at this point? Cheryl? Diana? Martha? Mark?
yeah.
Please do.
I've been uncertain as to the role of the building committee relative to the commission. Do we take direction from the commission, or do we take guidance from the commission? I'm assuming we take guidance from the commission. And there are decisions to be made that we don't necessarily have to go back to the commission for. Is that the, what do our chairman think of that? Or is there any other
I
comment
think
on
that's fair, it's guidance, but they have to point us in the direction, which is what we tried to accomplish a couple of weeks ago. They're not gonna tell us, you can't have a peak roof, or the building's gotta be
Understand that.
400 square feet or 500 square feet. That's up to us to come up with a design and then present the finished product back to them. Because then that's gotta move forward for the financing.
Yeah, I got it.
Fair enough?
I would just add, first off, it's a good question, and I'm not sure there's a definitive answer, because I'm not sure how many of these there've been in the context of this type of a building. I mean, I think the most recent one was a DPW garage. You have a fellow who's running that, part of the government, and
Oh,
saying,
yes.
if you don't give me this, I can't do my job, This is a little different, this is a kind of somewhat, far more subjective than that.
Yeah.
So I'm not
More
sure.
open-ended.
Yeah, so I think as Randy said, I agree. I think what I used, the term I used to describe it with the commission the other day was, they need to tell us the what, not the how. So now, there's gonna be other points along the way where we're talking what's, and I guess we're gonna have to decide if we feel we need to bring it back
Yeah.
to them. And I'm happy to continue to update them. My sense from the commission is they've told us the what, and they want us to go ahead and do it now. And I think they've been giving us, I think they're inclined to give us a lot of latitude around not only the how, but elements of the what. But, I went back and I looked at the charge, just to remind myself, and here's what it says, is one of the elements of the charge that we were given as a committee. It says, work with the architect and project development group to ensure that professionals design cost-effective space which meets the goals recommended by the Parks and Recreation Commission. So I think we have their recommendation, and I think it's up to us now. But I think it's a good question to continue to ask ourselves, because in my role, I don't think there's a black and white answer to it, right? And I don't think maybe what's kind of unsaid in what you're asking is, I don't think any of us feel like we want to be here if you don't have a say in what's being done here, right? So I think, not to put words in your mouth, and I think we went back, we asked the what, they clarified that it's up to us, that's the nature of the building committee, it's up to us to figure out how to get this thing built, and when there are questions along the way, we probably should go back and clarify it with them.
Okay, thank you.
You're good with? Yeah. Okay.
I've said this before, and it really bothers me. I'm envisioning this going down the approval process. We were gonna hear a more in-depth version of how this flexible space is to be used, to be run, et cetera, et cetera. We've been at this since October, and it's still nebulous in my mind. I mean, I think somebody has to define this better. I mean, are we gonna allow the architect to design it for us? I mean, does somebody have some thoughts on this?
I think the architect is gonna design it for us, and we've tried to clarify it by being a gathering space for the public, and having a place that they can congregate.
So, not to speak for Lori, who's not here at the moment, but I know Lori and I have chatted about it. I know Lori's giving a lot of thought to it, and I think Lori feels like there's a responsibility on the part of the commission to be more definitive about it. Types of uses, hours of use, controls around, what can be done there. And I believe she's, once again, I don't want to assign something to her, but I'll go back and I'll follow up with Lori on that, because to your point, and I understand why there's a frustration around it.
It's to guide the architect too.
No, I understand why there's frustration around it as well, because we have kind of brought it to the table more than once, and I think just for the community as well, to understand like what are the constraints or what are the rules that'll govern the use of this facility. So I'll take that as a kind of takeaway, and wearing both of my hats.
And I know they did that with the paddle hut space too. So it went back to the commission assigned all the hours and the uses, and then as it evolved, they revisited it.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, the Board of Selectmen really wanted the space to be, utilized off-season, not just on-season.
Mm-hmm.
Not let it sit there empty. And so that's what we do today. So off-season, we're really, advertising that it's available.
Sure.
And in fact, when I was at Wheat Beach, I noticed, the big space between the two buildings.
Mhm.
And if there's a need for space to hang out, that would be a good place to start to put some furniture. I mean, that seems pretty ideal. It's just a bank, basically an
Oh, you mean,
empty-
inside the bathhouse?
You're short, you say, of,
We program in there. They have yoga classes in there.
in the
I'm
middle
sorry.
there.
In the middle. Yeah,
Really?
yeah,
Okay, so
inside
you
the
don't wanna put
bathhouse.
furniture.
So they actually,
Okay,
they
I didn't
have
know that.
classes in there, yeah.
All right, good.
Yeah.
That's a we,
Yeah,
yeah.
Oh, I
yeah, we
had
have
no
gorgeous
idea.
pictures of
And
really.
that's what you're calling that community space as well?
No, we haven't, but people do like congregate there for classes and or leisure. So it's
I
always
think to Diana's
available.
point, it's a space that you can use. If you're
Yeah.
programming it, that would be a flexible community space
Right.
at Weed.
Right, right.
Yeah, I do think it behooves us to define it a little bit, because I think there's a lot of confusion when we use the word community space. People are thinking that you're doing a banquet hall or
Right,
renting.
right, right.
And if really what you're talking about is a place for folks to go and have yoga classes at the beach now and again, it's a completely different, it conjures a completely different perception of what that space is for.
I'll take that.
They did
Hopefully I can deliver on it, but I'll take it.
Right.
They did have some exercise classes up in the gazebo too, at Pear Tree.
It seems small.
Years ago. Well, it was just a small group, maybe 4 women or something, and they were doing a little class thing up there. I don't think it was a program through Park and Rec, but there was a group of women that used to do some exercises up there. So, I mean, there are places around to do that, but, yeah, I too would like to know, because I think this is driving a lot of us crazy on this committee, as to not knowing, are we putting a little catering kitchen in there? Are we not? Are we heating it or not? Are we air conditioning it or not? I mean, is it a year-round building or is it a 3-month building? Room.
Well, I think
What
the
is
commi-
this?
But the commission, so, look, we touched on this at the outset. The commission's punted on some of those questions. They've punted on whether it's heated or not. So we have our hands tied at the moment a little bit, although Neil doesn't feel as though it's preventing him from addressing things. But you're right. I mean, we have to get those answers from the commission. And I don't know if this is the question that's being asked. I don't think the committee is in a position where we can determine whether that's going to be heated or not. I don't think that's, maybe, I mean, if we wanted to, we could say, hey, look, we've all voted unanimously, we think it should be heat, and I would take that back to the commission and say, the committee would like it to be heated, what do you guys think? So if you want to handle it that way, we can handle it that way as well. I mean, if there are things-
Maybe we
Well, we
should
should get
step.
some cost numbers around that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course.
We should have some
Yeah.
alternatives that we present back and
Yeah.
say this is
Yeah,
what.
maybe we should take
it
the
could look like.
initiative
Yeah,
here
I have
to
no problem with that.
step up and try and come to some conclusions, because it is. It's, if we put the heating elements in, but we don't put a furnace in, where's the furnace gonna go if you want this heated?
Mhm.
I mean, this is all stuff that has to be
I
into the
I have a
drawings.
suggestion. I'd like to go back to the commission. If it's not year-round and we don't need the heat and air conditioning, then we don't need a second story. We could have a pavilion. I specifically asked that of the architect. You know, if there were not walls,
Mark.
if there,
Would it-
may I finish, please?
Well,
If there were,
look,
may I finish, please?
Well,
I
look.
guess I can't.
Look, you can finish. I think we're kind of in territory here that maybe, look, I'm not a Robert's Rules of Order guy, but we may be kind of entering the territory that's a little out of order. The commission's voted. I just read the charge that we're supposed to be following on the recommendations of the commission. You can talk, I'm happy to stay here all night, but I'm just reminding you that we're into territory here that I'm not really sure the value to this committee of having that conversation. Feel free to discuss it, but I'm just reminding you that the commission's weighed in on it, and we have a charge. So feel free now. I thought I'd have to remind us on that, but feel free.
I have no intention of taking up a lot of time on this. If we don't need to heat the community space, it can be a pavilion. If it's a pavilion, it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to have walls, and we're not subjected, you know, to the same restrictions. So there's a world of difference in terms of cost, whether it's a pavilion or an elevated space. And it's not a world of difference in its usage if it's only seasonal. I'm done.
I thought that the commission had said that it was year-round as part of that.
Well, I think they punted on whether it would be heated, and you know, and I think it's what's implied is if they're punting on whether it would be heated or not. I can't imagine how it would be year-round if it's without heat. So I think the signal to us is they have to discuss that, they have to determine for themselves whether it is or it isn't. Okay,
Would you take that to the commission for me, please?
take what to the commission?
My
Ask them to
suggestion
reconsider what
that
they
if it
voted
does
on?
not have to be heated, it does not have to be a second-story building, it can be a pavilion. Easily said, you know.
How about if I suggest this, why don't you write something and send it as a note to Lori, and leave that to Lori to determine whether or not she wants to bring that back to a vote of the commission.
I move that this building committee take that suggestion to the commission. Is there a second?
I believe that's out of order, and I can, if you'd like, I'm prepared to explain to you why that's out of order.
Yes, please.
Okay, so the first reason it's out of order is it's intended to distract the group from resolving legitimate business. In other words, we understand what the legitimate business of the building committee is, and it's to proceed with what the commission has recommended to us. That's in our charge. And I'm taking our charge as though it's the bylaws of the committee. and from my perspective, I think is a distraction. We went through, we had a lengthy conversation with the commission a couple of weeks back. They voted, and I don't believe we have any responsibility to bring back. Now, I'm not preventing you from you have the wherewithal to go ahead and send a note on to Lori and ask Lori to reconsider, but I don't feel as though that's an item that we need to vote on, so I'm not willing to allow the committee to vote on that item.
Mr. Chairman, is there a second?
Well, I would second it. I
I'm
think
telling you it's out of order, so you can second it, but it's out of order.
Well, I mean,
Okay,
I think
so it's out of order
it's
for
just,
two of us.
it's elaborating
Well, it's-
that if you don't heat the building, it doesn't really make sense to have an elevated structure with bathrooms.
Look, we could sit here all night. I mean, I'm not sure where this is going, but from my perspective, this is a motion that's out of order.
And here they did say too, made a motion to approve having the flexible community space to be enclosed.
I'm not preventing you guys from taking it back to Lori. Lori's an ex officio member of the committee. You should feel free. But I think it's beyond the charge of this committee to go back and challenge. We had an opportunity last week. Why didn't you bring that up last week?
It was 10:30 at night.
Well, okay, what does that have to do with it?
I was tired, I don't know about you.
Well, I think we were all tired, but we were there to conduct business, and that was our opportunity. And I opened that meeting clearly indicating that the purpose of the meeting was to create an open dialogue with the commission on that specific set of items. So I certainly was willing to stay there all night, and I told Lori that I was willing to stay there all night.
I only want to continue the open dialogue.
Well, I'm not preventing you from doing that. I believe it's beyond the purview of this commission, of this committee, to take a vote on this. It has nothing to do with anything that we have within our charts to do that now.
Mike, in the minutes, were you reading the minutes, Pam? Page 2.
Yeah.
Okay, it says here, clarification, in the minutes, for new elevated structure, upper deck for viewing and dining and flexible community space. Made a motion to approve the addition of an upper level deck for viewing and dining and a flexible community space. Unanimous. So next one was for new elevated structure, ability to enclose flexible community space. Ability. Motion was made to approve having the flexible community space having the ability to be enclosed. It doesn't mean that it is going to be enclosed, correct?
No, I think the interpretation of ability is whether you have sliding doors or you have a type of a garage door that goes up.
Right, so some
So
sort
it
of
can be
way
enclosed.
of enclosing it.
Correct, correct.
But it doesn't mean that it's a wall with insulation in it, permanent structure,
Okay.
correct?
Well, I'm not sure
I
if
mean,
it's
it would
permanent
be a
structure, but it's certainly.
You know, if it's going to be a wall, I mean, this says the ability for enclosure. What the hell did I read?
Well, I think Neil shared a model. I think that, the commission had the opportunity to view the model as well.
Right,
And so I think
and
the model certainly implies
we
that it's.
discussed, at the time they discussed sliding doors,
Yep.
garage door type of thing.
Mhm.
So,
Like a nano wall.
in my opinion, sitting at that meeting and all the other meetings, was that it wasn't going to be built as a 2x6 with insulation and inside sheetrock or whatever you want to put inside it as a permanent wall like this. It wasn't going to be that type of a structure.
I think
It was
that's to
going to be a
determined.
structure with some kind of like a garage door to be closed
I
down.
think it's to be determined, right? I mean,
Well,
the
that's to
commission has
be
indicated
determined.
they're weighing in on whether it will be heated or not. So I'm imagining if the commission comes back to us and says they'd like it to be heated for use kind of in an extended season, maybe not year round, but maybe into a little later and beyond the summer season, it might make sense to have it insulated to some extent.
But on Mark's point, you're basically saying in your motion, which is on the floor and has been seconded.
No, it is not on the floor.
Oh, you took it off?
No, he took it off.
Well,
Somebody have something? Or?
My brain is working.
I mean, I have other references as to kind of, the definition of a motion that's out of order, if you'd like me to read through those as well, but as to why I believe this is out of order.
Well, maybe I'd just like to discuss it a little more, just the way we said the space between the two buildings is used, I see his point. If you're not gonna heat it, you can create a space on the ground level that's community space that can be used by people. Seasonally, fall, spring, summer, maybe not in the dead of winter. I see where he's going with that, it makes sense to me. I mean, if you're gonna elevate and not heat it, why do that? Why go to that expense? You can build some open structure that's a community space.
Martha,
I'm just talking.
I know you are, but I think the time to have that conversation, look, I think you missed an
I
opportunity.
have to say though, when you're sitting and getting a lot of information, you sit and you go back and you think about the meeting. Everybody, I'm sure, has viewed the meeting again. You come up with different thoughts. I'm just throwing that comment out, I guess, hoping that the Parks and Rec Commission will listen to this meeting and take it under consideration.
Okay.
Because it does say, there's different interpretations, like you say, Mike. They voted 7-1 under B down here. New elevated structure, ADA compliant. So that means that there just has to be an elevated structure. I mean, you can read all kinds of things into it, I know.
Yeah.
And then it says an upper deck for viewing and dining. So that just means a deck. Elevated flexible community space. That could be community space up on that deck without a roof over it.
Keep going. What's the next item?
Well, the next item is that they didn't vote on the next one in
No,
closed.
they did vote. No, they did vote.
Oh, I didn't have that down, I'm sorry.
They voted on enclosed flexible community space. They voted unanimously, in fact, on enclosed flexible community space.
They voted in enclosed, elevated, flexible community. Okay, I'm sorry. And then heating, they didn't vote on.
That's correct.
Concession, they didn't vote on. And the next three, they lumped together and voted on. And the last one, they removed. Okay, sorry.
Well, we're pretty good at circling around, aren't we? I think this is where we started.
Exactly.
Mr. Co-Chair, any guidance here?
The task from the commission is to build a two-story building, build a second floor. I mean, you can read what you want, they had a model in front of them that shows a elevated structure with an enclosed space on top of it, and that's what they voted on. If they want to go back and revisit the pavilion idea that Mark suggested, and God bless them, but at the moment, the charge is to go ahead with a two-story structure.
Well, I guess
I
depending
did feel
on-
like that was very clear coming out of the
Yeah,
meeting, that
I
that's
guess
what we were voting on.
depending on what they say with respect to the heating, we'll revisit it.
The heating is, again, what Neil said, you gotta look at how much real estate the heating's gonna take.
Well, exactly,
And
yeah.
whether you wanna, whether you wanna commit that space up there to do that. And you still have an issue of if somehow we're not allowed to keep bathrooms downstairs, or we can't,
Well, I mean, that's a
finance it.
completely different issue. I
then
mean,
you got a
you know.
whole nother can of worms.
Right.
I think we just have to move on.
Yeah. Okay, so, I guess I would have taken this as, we're on item 5 of new business, so, any other new business? Okay, so without any further new business, I guess we move on to our next item on the agenda. I invite a motion to adjourn the meeting. Diana, you have a second? Dale, thank you very much. All those in favor? Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, TV 79.